There we go. Good evening again, everybody. Great to see you all. Okay, so I'm going to talk tonight, as I have for the last couple of weeks, about breathing meditation, um, which is one of the foundational practices, of course. Today, we're going to get to the Anapanasati and the Satipatthana suttas, which I'll talk about, I'll explain, and we'll be with those for several weeks. So just to catch us up, we started a couple of weeks ago with just talking about what breath is. And in Buddhist practice and in spiritual practice more broadly, it is not just the movement of air in and out of the lungs, not just this mechanical movement of oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and so forth. It's energy, it's life force. It's much richer and it pervades the whole body. So there's a very rich movement. And then last week, I jumped forward in time. This week we're going to be going back, but I jumped forward to 4th, 5th century Sri Lanka. There's a guy by the name of Buddhaghosa who wrote a text called the Visuddhimagga, Path of Purification, which was a doctrinal and practice text for what became Theravadan Buddhism. That Buddhism kind of disappeared from India. It remained in Sri Lanka. It went north from India to China, but the Sri Lankan arm was grounded on practices which were really around what the Visuddhimagga taught. And it then informed, went back and forth with Thailand and Myanmar and Southeastern Asia. So profoundly influential text. The reason I went there is because he wrote a commentary. He wrote a textual commentary on the Anapanasati Sutra, and he followed that with a narrative description of how to practice with breath meditation. And most particularly, he listed 8 stages. So last week we had a guided meditation where we went through the 8 stages and kind of experienced those 8 stages. So if you're interested, I encourage you, those are recorded, you can go back and listen to those talks and you can listen to the guided meditation. It's actually what Winnie was talking about. There's a little bit of a hiss in the background, but hopefully it's not too distracting. But this gives you an experience of working with these different ways of practicing with the breath. Counting. Then there's contact, which connection rather, which goes to touching and fixing, which are about following the breath and then following it in one place and watching it as it becomes more subtle. So there's 8 stages of really working with and experiencing the breath. These are techniques of working with the breath that you can use anywhere. And one of the things they work with as we settle in with the breath, the whole experience becomes more subtle. And so the initial gross experiences kind of disappear. So we've got to move with that to more subtle ways of working with the breath. So I wanted to jump to that because it's a really useful framework. So now we're coming back to 4th, 5th century BCE, which is the Anapanasati Sutta and the Satipatthana Sutta. These, the titles roughly mean in-breath, out-breath, mindfulness, and mindfulness foundations, mindfulness establishments. So the first one, it's got 16 steps. Breathing in, I know this. Breathing in, I know that. Breathing in, I train myself. Breathing out, I train myself. There's 16 steps, which are a progressive, deepening practice of meditation. Those 16 steps break into 4 tetrads, which actually line up with the Satipatthana, which is mindful of the body in the body, feelings in the feelings, mind in the mind, dharmas in the dharmas. I'll explain those in a minute. As I say, I'm going to spend several weeks on these. This week, what I want to do is really focus on mindfulness itself. Talk about what mindfulness is, because it's central to both of these sutras. And it's something that we talk a lot about, but there's a great difference between the way we talk about mindfulness, say in therapy or in a medical practice, and how we talk about it in a Buddhist context, because the intention is different. Before I get there, just a couple of introductory words about these texts and how to read them. If you are interested, you can look up Sutta Central, which is a web resource, and there are 3 or 4 different commentaries. It's all free. There are 3 or 4 different commentaries on each of these sutras. So you can read these and do comparative reads. And there are a ton of commentaries on these sutras. And there are a ton of commentaries for a couple of different reasons. One is because they are really important sutras. In the Pali Canon, these are like the central texts on how to practice. You'll come back to them again and again and again, and they profoundly influenced Buddhism and Buddhist practice over the millennia. So that's one obvious reason for there being a lot of commentaries. The other reason is because neither of these sutras is complete. Very little Buddha spoke in the Pali Canon is complete. Taught a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit somewhere else. And so you have to fill in the gaps by reading in different places. These were oral teachings, and he was teaching people where he met them on what was useful to them right there. So it's very selective teaching. So if you roll it forward 2,500 years and look for a coherent single source, you're not going to find it. So these commentaries have very different takes on how to work with these. So for example, some of the commentaries will say with the Anapanasati, you have to work step by step. You do step 1, and when you've mastered step 1, then you move on to step 2, and so on. Some of them say, yeah, you can pick and choose. You can jump in wherever you like and jump around. Some of them say they all do kind of the same thing, but some just get a little deeper than others. Mixed bag, you pick and you choose. So I don't think there's a right answer. And I'm going to, as I work through it, give an approach that I have, the way of working with these that I have found most useful. The reason these persist, the reason above all else that people continue to come back to these and they continue to write about them and practice them, is that the Buddha taught a path to complete freedom. He wasn't teaching us how to feel a little bit better. This is really important when we get to the definition of mindfulness. He wasn't teaching us how to feel a little bit better, how to be a little bit happier, how to feel good in and good about our bodies. He was teaching us how to wake up, how to experience complete freedom. So this is the context for these teachings and for everything around these teachings. One of the places where the interpretations of these sutras can differ as well is the 2 arms to this meditation practice that are really necessary to awakening and how these fit in with these different stepwise approaches. And the 2 arms, we've talked about them before, but it's really important, so I'll recap. Shamatha and Vipassana, which in Chinese are Zhi and Guan, roughly. So they don't quite line up, but close. The one is calming, settling, stabilizing, which is what the jhanas in the Pali Canon are about. In the Chinese tradition, it's cessation or stopping. But it's a sense of just stilling the mind. And there's a body peace that arises when that happens. And the other practice, which is Guan or Vipassana, is cultivating insight. So from this still place, we can then see clearly. We can see emptiness, we can see impermanence, we can see non-self, we can see how everything we experience is a fabrication. It's a story. It's not what's really there. It's what we're making up. And we can unpack that, see more clearly. So this is cultivating calming and insight of the two legs, and seeing how these fit into these two sutras is important. All right, so mindfulness. What is this thing called mindfulness? It is not naked awareness. It's not just being present. It's not, as I say, becoming more happy, becoming more content. It's active, it's not passive. So I'm going to read something here. This is actually out of the Satipatthana Sutta, and then I'll talk about it. There is the case where a monk remains focused on the body in and of itself, ardent, alert, and mindful, subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. And then it does the same with feelings. He remains focused on feelings in and of themselves, ardent, alert, and mindful, subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. So on with mental factors or mind and mental qualities or dharmas. Very simple. This is repeated again and again and again throughout the Satipatthana Sutta. And it is a really important frame of reference for how we look at mindfulness. So unpacking this, the word mindfulness is sati in Pali, it's smrti in Sanskrit, and it means recollection, remembering. When Rhys David, who was 19th century Brit, who in the time of the Theosophists and that early mid 19th century explorations into what was then called the Oriental studies. He was one of the pioneers of exploring these Pali and Tibetan texts. And when he was looking to translate this word smrti, the frame of reference he came back to was the Episcopal Book of Common Prayer, in which there's a phrase, being mindful of the needs of others. This is the valence of mindful that he was trying to pick up, that he read in these suttas. Mindful of the needs of others. This isn't simple awareness. It's very intentional. And specifically, it is recalling. So what this is about, and we'll get into the three words that it uses to describe it: ardent, alert, and mindful. You've got this self-referential thing with mindfulness is ardent, alert, and mindful. The third of those, mindful, recollection, remembering what worked, remembering what we did in the past, remembering past experiences, remembering how we approached dukkha and what was helpful in calming dukkha, and being able to bring that forward. So there's this constant recollection that is not implied, but expressed within this idea of mindfulness. Then ardent is effort. Ardent is actually doing work. Ardent, there's an intention, a commitment, an energy here. So again, it's not passive. It's not just making ourselves feel a little bit better. It's recalling, coming up with an intention out of that, and then working on that intention. Now, in the Noble Eightfold Path, we have right effort. Right effort is when Positive tendencies have come forth. We nurture and water those. When skillful or positive behaviors or tendencies are latent, we water and bring those forward. So we're constantly cultivating skillful behaviors. Skillful being behaviors that lead towards liberation. This is the benchmark. Does it increase or reduce dukkha? Does it lead towards liberation or away from liberation? So bringing forward skillful tendencies. When unskillful behaviors or tendencies are present, we turn away from those. We let them fade. And when unskillful tendencies have not come forward, we let them wither. Don't pay any attention. Don't bring them forward. So this right effort is the flavor of this ardency. It's something we do. And it's something we can feel. If we tune in with our bodies, which is what we're being invited to do with these, if we tune in with our bodies and we tune in with our feelings, then if we start to move in the direction of unskillful, we can start to feel tightening. We can start to feel rising of energy into the head, more mental activity. This isn't going to a good place. Let me go the other way. Let's not water this. Conversely, if we're open in our heart with compassion, if we're avoiding being caught by our greed and anger, then we feel ourselves calm and we feel peace emerging. This is skillful. This is leading in the right direction. Let's water and cultivate this. This is all part of mindfulness. And the recollection, that is the smriti, the sati. This is also somatic. When you remember things, you feel these in your body. It's not just head stuff. When you remember a relationship with somebody, when you remember how something made you feel, it's in the body. So this is really experience practice, embodied practice. Ardent, alert, and mindful. Alert is being present now. So a lot of the time, the contemporary understandings of mindfulness really just circle around this alert, just be present. But that's not enough. Necessary, yes, you need to be here now. You do need to be paying attention. But these other attributes of recollection, bringing forward from the past how things made us feel, what we learned, and setting this ardency which moves us with our action into the future. These are crucial parts of mindfulness. Body in the body, feelings in the feelings. This is one of the things that comes out in that guided meditation we did last week. When you're following the breath, you're actually in the breath. It's not mind following breath. It's breath following breath. You've just meditated for half an hour. When you settle into your meditation, the idea is to drop the energy from the head down into the body. So we're not following the body with our minds. It's the body experiencing the body. Sometimes this can be hard to understand because we understand with our heads and we're so top heavy, living in our head so much, we just naturally place things in the head. But we did the progressive body relaxation at the beginning here, and that's intentionally about from the head, relax on down, let the weight drop. And as you let the weight drop, you feel yourself coming down into the body. And so this is the body in the body. When we get distracted and the mind takes over, the energy comes back up again. And you can feel it. If you're used to being down in the body, you can notice And then you have to do this relaxation again to just drop the energy down, body in the body. So all of this mindfulness exercise, this mindfulness practice is about getting ourselves out of our heads and this deeper practice of ardent, alert, and mindful. Same when we move to the second category, feelings in the feelings. Feeling is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Very simple. First contact experience, you hear a noise, you see something, you touch something. There's an immediate reaction of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It's just that immediate response. Then we build a story on top of it, and it becomes a perception of green, white, warm, cold, sweet, sour, right? There's other things get built on top, but that initial pleasant, unpleasant, that's the feeling term we're talking about, feeling. And at that initial level, that is a purely somatic experience. It happens, we're trained so incredibly quickly it becomes mental, and then we start building the overlay. But that initial experience is purely somatic. So this feelings in the feelings is about cultivating a more subtle awareness so we can be there at that moment of arising and have just this pure somatic experience at whichever one of the sense gates it is of just this feeling term, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Body in the body, feelings in the feelings, mind in the mind, dharmas in the dharmas. Subduing greed and distress. This is the poisons, right? Greed, anger, and ignorance. So not getting caught. It talks about subduing. You can argue about whether quite what you're supposed to do with subduing, but it really, at the very least, it means not getting caught by, not letting ourselves get hooked on. So with this presence, not letting ourselves get hooked by, caught by, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Which again is contrary to many modern understandings of mindfulness. It's about feeling better. It's not about feeling better. It's about being okay no matter how you feel. Recognizing that how I feel isn't what really matters. That's entirely superficial. It's getting underneath that to where freedom lies. In the later traditions, the Chan tradition, the Chinese traditions, you are already free. It's here in this too. It's just not expressed in the same way. You're already free. If you weren't, waking up wouldn't be possible. This is an exercise of seeing what obstructs you. Mindfulness is an exercise of seeing what obstructs you from that freedom and letting go of it. So all that's left when you've let go of everything is this freedom. So not subduing greed and distress means letting those get out of the way so this freedom can be exposed, this natural freedom. Subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. What is this world? What is your world, folks? Your world is precisely what your six senses inform you of. There cannot be anything else. Not possible. Give me any example of a world that doesn't come to you through your six senses. You can't. So in this tradition, the world, yes, you can get language that talks about Mars and heavens and hells and demons and all sorts of things. But fundamentally, what it's about is your direct sensory experience, because that is your world. And the flip of that is that when we come back to this progressive body relaxation and we come to this feeling tone, come back to your feeling tone, should be feeling content, at ease, right? When we come back to that feeling tone, that colors how we experience the world. If that feeling tone is irritation or anger, our world's going to be pretty unpleasant. If that feeling tone is gratitude, it's going to be okay. If that feeling tone is content, it's a really good place for this settling and this insight practice. And we can control, within reason, we can control, actually, we can control that feeling tone, period. There's no qualifications. We can control that. Our ability to do so is contingent on the depth of our practice, but all of us can do it to some extent. And with practice, you can do so more and more and more, which allows you to enter this practice in a way that allows you to go deep. I'll come back to that in just a minute when I get into the foundation. But before I do that, there's one other thing I want to do around this ardent, alert, and mindful. There is another sutta that I'm going to read an extract from. Right view is for the nerds among you. This is Majjhima Nikaya 117. Right view is the forerunner. And how is right view the forerunner? One discerns wrong resolve or wrong intention as wrong resolve, and right resolve is right resolve. This is one's right view. One makes an effort for abandoning wrong resolve and for entering into right resolve. This is one's right effort. One is mindful to abandon wrong resolve and enter and remain in right resolve. This is one's right mindfulness. Thus, these three qualities, right view, right effort, and right mindfulness, run and circle round right resolve. So the Noble Eightfold Path, right view, right thought, or right resolve, right effort, right view, right resolve, right action, right speech, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. It's the Noble Eightfold Path. What this was doing, it was picking the second of those, right resolve or right thought, and saying right view, which is the first one, is the forerunner, and it, together with right effort and right mindfulness, circle round right resolve. It does that with every one of the steps on the Noble Eightfold Path. It says, for each of the 8 steps, these 3 run around it. They circle around it. Now, these 3, they're really lining up with what we talked about for this actual description of Buddhism of mindfulness practice. Right view, I would argue, lines up with sati or smrti. It's the recollection. It's what works, what doesn't work. It's a clear understanding. It's setting the right framework, practical, workable framework for our practice. Right intention is ardency. Right intention is the engagement in action. Right effort, rather. Right effort is the engagement in action and the impact of that action as we go forward, the karmic impact. This lines up with ardency. And right mindfulness, of course, lines up with mindfulness. So this is another way of framing right mindfulness and going, I think, very clearly to a richer and more useful understanding of what we mean by mindfulness when we talk about mindfulness. Very active, very intentional. He also, I won't be able to find it if I look very quickly, but in the Satipatthana Sutta, in many places, he talks about the method of practice, this method of practice. And you will often hear me talk about the importance of having a method. It's not okay. You can have a very pleasant meditation if you sit there, you reach a calm, still place, and you just sit there and you enjoy it. It's great. You're just enjoying the scenery, and then you come out of your meditation, you get on with your life. You just had a good trip to the beach, to the Grand Canyon, and now you're on with life. You're not going anywhere. You're just going and looking at the scenery and coming back. You take your method with you and you stay focused on your method. You're engaged in practice. You're constantly looking at calming and insight within the practice. You're not just looking at the scenery. You're strengthening concentration. You're cultivating skills. You're becoming more skillful at abandoning your suffering. So This approach to mindfulness, ardency, alertness, is a method. Constantly attentive, not just watching the scenery. All right, I want to finish today with the foundation. It was something I said I'd come back to. I may remember to, or I may not. And if I don't, you can remind me. All right. Oh, I know what it was because it will naturally come up. So there's a preamble here on the, back to the Anapanasati Sutta here, which is, I'm going to be working through the two of these in parallel, but I'll be generally doing the Anapanasati first, and then the Satipatthana later as I work through these in upcoming weeks. This is from the Anapanasati, although it also appears in the Satipatthana, the same phrase and the same introductory 4 steps of breathing appear. Now, how is mindfulness of in and out breathing developed and pursued so as to be of great fruit and great benefit? The great fruit and great benefit, by the way, is the path to complete freedom. And he talks about that at the end of the sutta. This is how it leads to complete freedom. So that's the fruit and benefit. How is this to be pursued for that end? There is the case where a monk, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of the tree or to an empty building, sits down, folding his or her legs crosswise, holding their body erect and putting mindfulness to the fore. Always mindful, he breathes in, mindful, she breathes out. And then we get to breathing in. Now I'm breathing in long, breathing in short, experiencing the body, calming the body. That's crudely the first tetrad. So what this is saying, gone to the wilderness to the shade of the tree, away from the hubbub of the world, right where you are, right where your meditation space is at home, sits down, folding legs crosswise. If your body is flexible enough to get into the lotus posture, it is above all others the best posture for meditation. Most of us, including me, aren't flexible enough to do that for sustained periods. I can do it for half an hour, but it just can't do it for long enough to make it worthwhile. But it is the best posture because what the posture is about, it's about the asana, the posture, as a container of energy. So there's closed loops, lots of closed loops that keep energy in. And then there's also this sense of you're locked in a pose. If you're in the lotus posture and a tiger walks across in front of you, you ain't going anywhere. So you're still and alert. Exactly the posture you want for meditation. Locked in place and yet fully alert. So posture matters, and having a still posture, having a posture where you can stay there, because moving, you settle in and then you adjust. Every time you adjust, you bring yourself back out. Being able to stay still in your posture is important. So finding that straight, upright, still posture, stable posture. Balance is good. The Lotus Sutra is very symmetrical, so balance is good. And then getting used to that, training yourself to sit through sore legs and so forth so you can stay there. Setting mindfulness to the fore. So this, one of the things that's debated is, what does putting it to the fore mean? I would argue it simply means giving it prominence. So it's settling in on this method, concentrating on this method and staying with this method. No distractions. Distraction comes up, you put it aside. Stay with ardent, alert, and mindful, and apply that to your subject. And always mindful, breathes in, mindful, breathes out. And then there's the first tetrad, which ends up with calming the body. So what this is doing is it's fundamentally doing what we just did in that opening progressive relaxation. You're clarifying the mind, getting wandering thoughts out of the way, staying very focused on your method. You're calming the body, relaxing the body, and you're cultivating a pleasant feeling tone. This is the foundation for meditation practice. And it's right here at the beginning of the Anapanasati Sutta. It's also right there at the beginning of the Satipatthana Sutta. Exactly the same language. So that's what I wanted to cover today. The little bit of history and background. Really spent some time talking about mindfulness. Bring us back from that mindfulness to this somatic embodied experience, which is what this is all about, getting out of the head and into the body, because that's where waking up happens. Part of the background was recognizing what this practice is about. And then talking again about this foundation, because this foundation is so important. So next week, we'll get into, unless I think of something I should do in the meantime, we'll get into the 16 steps, the 4 tetrads of the Anapanasati Sutta. So with that, I will finish and invite questions, comments, and reflections.